The lights inside the America's Got Talent Theater burned brighter than usual that night, as if the stage itself could sense something unforgettable was about to happen. The audience buzzed with excitement, people whispering, pointing at the giant screen, waiting for the next contestant to walk out. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair with that familiar expression, half curiosity, half boredom, the look of a man who had seen it all. Thousands of auditions, countless singers, endless tributes to legends like Elvis Presley. Most of them were good, some were terrible, and a few were memorable. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared anyone for what was about to unfold. The announcer's voice boomed across the room, introducing the next act, and the crowd clapped politely, expecting another ordinary performance. After all, the title on the screen was simple: Elvis Tribute Singer. People thought they knew exactly what was coming. A grown man in a jumpsuit, maybe a cheesy impersonation, perhaps a decent voice, but nothing groundbreaking. Simon even raised an eyebrow, as if to say, "All right, let's get this over with." But when the curtain finally parted and the contestant stepped forward, the entire room shifted, because standing there was not who anyone expected. Instead of a seasoned performer, the spotlight revealed a young boy, small, humble, almost fragile-looking, dressed in a plain shirt and worn-out shoes. He didn't have Elvis's signature outfit, no glittering cape, no flashy stage confidence. He looked more like someone who belonged in the audience, not on the biggest talent stage in the world. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some people smiled awkwardly, unsure if this was meant to be a joke. How could a child possibly capture the voice of the king of rock and roll? Simon's expression hardened. He tilted his head slightly, already skeptical. "So, you're going to sing Elvis?" Simon asked, his tone sharp but curious. The boy nodded gently, gripping the microphone with both hands, as if it were the only thing keeping him steady. "Yes, sir," he answered softly, his accent hinting at a life far from Hollywood. Heidi Klum leaned forward, intrigued. "Why Elvis?" she asked warmly. The boy took a deep breath, eyes shining with emotion. "Because my father used to play Elvis songs every night," he said. "When things were hard, Elvis made us feel like we could dream." The audience grew quieter, sensing something deeper beneath the simple audition. Simon still looked unconvinced, but the boy's sincerity was undeniable. And then, with one final breath, the music began. The first few piano notes floated through the theater, soft and haunting. The boy closed his eyes. For a moment, everything was still. No chatter, no movement, no judgment. Then he opened his mouth, and the impossible happened. A voice emerged that didn't belong to a child. It wasn't a cute imitation. It wasn't a karaoke performance. It was rich, deep, soulful, the kind of voice that seemed to come from another era entirely. The audience froze, as if someone had pressed pause on reality. The sound was pure Elvis. Not just the tone, but the feeling, the heartbreak, the swagger, the velvet power behind every note. Simon's eyes widened instantly. Heidi's mouth dropped open. Howie Mandel sat up so fast it looked like he'd been shocked by electricity. The boy moved slightly with the rhythm, channeling the spirit of the king with eerie precision. The theater felt like it had been transported back in time to a smoky 1960s concert hall. People in the crowd stared at each other in disbelief, silently asking, "Is this real?" Even the cameramen seemed stunned, their lenses locked onto the boy, as if afraid to miss a single second. And as the chorus hit, his voice soared higher, stronger, filling every corner of the room. It wasn't just good. It was unreal. Halfway through the song, something magical happened. The audience began to rise. At first, it was just a few people standing, hands over their mouths. Then more, and more, until the entire theater was on its feet, not because they were told to, but because their bodies reacted before their minds could even process what they were hearing. Tears streamed down faces. A grown man near the front wiped his eyes repeatedly, shaking his head in disbelief. The boy's voice carried pain and hope at the same time, as if every lyric held his entire life story. Simon Cowell, the harshest judge in the world, was no longer leaning back. He was leaning forward, completely locked in. His usual smirk was gone. His face was serious, almost emotional. The boy reached the final verse, and his voice trembled with raw feeling, not weakness, but humanity. It was as if Elvis himself had returned, not in a costume, not in an impersonator, but in the most unexpected form possible. A child with a dream bigger than the stage. The final note hung in the air like a prayer. Silence followed, not because people didn't know what to do, but because they couldn't. The moment was too powerful. Then the theater exploded. Screams. Applause. Standing ovation thundered like a storm. People shouted his name even though they had just met him. The boy stood still, breathing hard, eyes wide, almost confused by the overwhelming reaction. Heidi clapped furiously. Howie was yelling, "And no way, no way." Sofia Vergara held her chest dramatically, shaking her head with a smile of pure shock. And Simon Cowell was speechless. For once in his career, the man known for crushing dreams couldn't find a single critical word. He stared at the boy, as if trying to understand what he had just witnessed. Finally, Simon leaned into his microphone. The room went silent again. "I don't know what just happened," Simon began slowly, his voice softer than usual. "But that was one of the most unexpected, unbelievable auditions I've ever seen." The audience erupted again. The boy's eyes filled with tears. Simon continued, "You shouldn't be able to sing like that. It doesn't make sense. And yet here you are." The boy whispered, "Thank you," barely audible. Heidi smiled warmly. "You are a miracle," she said. Howie laughed. "Elvis would be proud, kid." The boy covered his face, overwhelmed. And then came the moment everyone was waiting for. Simon stood up. The crowd screamed instantly. Everyone knew what that meant. Simon Cowell almost never stood up unless something truly extraordinary happened. The boy looked up in shock, frozen like a statue. Simon walked closer to the stage, still staring at him with disbelief. "You came here looking like someone nobody would notice," Simon said. "But the second you sang, the world stopped." The boy trembled, tears falling freely now. Simon paused, letting the emotion settle. "This is why this show exists," he said firmly. "To find voices like yours, voices nobody expects." The audience roared louder than ever. The boy's dream had just transformed into reality in front of millions. As confetti began to fall and the judges continued praising him, one thing was certain. This audition would never be forgotten. Not because it was an Elvis tribute, not because it was a child singing a classic song, but because it proved something deeper. That greatness doesn't always come from where you think. Sometimes the most shocking voice comes from the most unexpected soul. And that night, on the AGT stage, Elvis wasn't just remembered, he was reborn.